Hey guys, today I'll show you a horror thriller TV series named Gannibal, Season 1. Spoilers ahead, watch out and take care. The drama takes place in a Japanese village called Kuge, which also means offering flowers. County Police Officer Kano drove his patrol car up to an old house, pounding on the door and shouting for everyone to come out. He knew they were in there. Indeed, there were people inside the house. Someone was filming Kano, while others moved around inside, but no one opened the door. Kano suddenly declared they were cannibals and urged them to admit it. As he spoke, he drew his gun and fired several shots into the sky. Spotting an elderly woman filming from upstairs, he cursed them to open the door. But he never managed to enter the old mansion. At night, Kano, holding a flashlight, ventured into a dimly lit tunnel. There was an iron gate at the end of the tunnel, behind which seemed to lie the evidence Kano had been seeking. Just as he was getting excited, a curved knife approached his throat. Days later, Officer Kano mysteriously disappeared. His superiors assigned a new county police officer, Daigo, to take over his duty. Daigo decided to move his wife and daughter to the picturesque village. His daughter Mashiro had been mute due to autism since she was young. Part of Daigo's reason for moving to the secluded village was due to his daughter. The flower-offering village was surrounded by a lake and connected by only one bridge. Upon arrival, the villagers warmly welcomed Daigo's family and even helped them unpack. Daigo introduced himself and exchanged pleasantries, promising to serve the villagers to the best of his abilities. In the evening, Daigo's wife, Yuki, started unpacking and found the investigative report left by the previous county police officer. Daigo didn't pay much attention to it. From what he knew, Kano had left his job due to a mountain of debt from gambling. However, hearing about his mysterious disappearance later was unsettling. Looking at Kano's old photos, he didn't look like a gambling addict. Daigo mentioned that Kano enjoyed playing games involving marbles, which was indeed intriguing. They also found a family photo of Kano, who had a beautiful daughter. Seeing her husband's lecherous gaze, Yuki rolled her eyes. Daigo quickly comforted her by suggesting they should also take a family photo. The next day, just as Daigo was about to start work, the villagers flocked in, offering to show him around the village. Daigo accepted their offer and was soon on his way. The scenery in the village was beyond words. A local vegetable vendor generously gifted Daigo a box of organic vegetables. Daigo found the place delightful with its rustic charm and warm-hearted people. The villagers took Daigo to the largest timber processing plant in the area. The village's economy was primarily sustained by the forestry industry. An old lady showed him how clean they had peeled this bark. She explained that cypress wood had a pleasant fragrance, and oil extracted from it had excellent antibacterial properties. In the past, it was applied to corpses to prevent decomposition. Daigo took this as a joke. Suddenly, the door banged open and the smiles disappeared from everyone's faces, except Daigo's. A man from the Goto family named Keisuke walked in asking for the police officer. As Daigo began to respond, the man interrupted him, saying they had found a body in the woods. Daigo followed him into the forest, leaving behind a crowd of terrified faces. A group of people had gathered around a body in the woods. Keisuke introduced the deceased as his grandmother. It turns out Granny Goto had disappeared 3 days ago and was found dead here. It looked like she had been mauled by a bear. Officer Daigo examined the body and found half of a glass's lens next to the head. The arm was severed and lay a meter away. Near the wrist, there was a bite mark that looked like a human bite. Keisuke suggested that his granny had bitten herself due to her dementia. Daigo dismissed this theory. It was impossible. The bite mark should be facing the body directly. It would not appear on the body in this shape. It was evident someone else had bitten her. A long-haired uncle of the family took offense, asking if the officer was implying that they abused the head of their family. He swore that the Goto family would never do such a thing. Daigo was taken aback because he never mentioned they had abused the granny. Suddenly, everyone pointed their guns at Daigo. Keisuke said they wouldn't tolerate any disrespect towards the Goto clan. Daigo reached for his gun but hesitated and raised his hands to apologize. Keisuke and the others burst out laughing. The uncle slapped Daigo on the back, saying they were just joking. Daigo retorted for their silly joke. He didn't shake hands with Keisuke for peace and even warned that if there was a next time, he would arrest them all. Keisuke and the others planned to go bear hunting the next day, so they were going to have a pep rally that evening. Daigo reported the discovery of the body to his superiors. After that, Keisuke invited Daigo to join them for drinks that night to build rapport. That evening, Daigo told his wife he had a social engagement. Yuki complained about having a lot of things to tidy at home and questioned if he could skip it. Daigo argued that it was bad manners to decline the first invitation. Yuki became a bit angry. She told their daughter to stop folding paper, but Mashiro continued. Seeing this, Daigo had a flash of violent images in his mind. It seemed he also had a past story. As Daigo cycled off, he noticed something was wrong. There was a long nail in his tire. As he was wondering if it was deliberate, his boss's phone call came in. After asking about Daigo's first day at work, he said that the bite mark on the body was under investigation. Until the situation was clear, it was best not to get involved too much, because the Goto family held a lot of power in the village. His boss warned Daigo to be careful, report any problems promptly, and remember he had a history too. Daigo acknowledged this, ended the call, and decided to walk since his bike was no longer rideable. The Goto family had already started drinking. A short man asked why Daigo's wife and daughter hadn't come to the party. Daigo made up an excuse that they were not at home. The short man regretfully said, "What a shame." And he heard Daigo's wife has big breasts. Keisuke interjected, saying they were clearly at home, and nothing stayed hidden in this small village. Then they made Daigo drink a large amount of alcohol, which he downed in one gulp. Meanwhile, at home, Yuki searched for a while but couldn't find the cable line. She figured she wouldn't be able to watch TV. Just as she decided to lie down and rest, she noticed two words carved into the doorframe: "Escape fast." There appeared to be blood on the words. The house was unusually quiet. She went to check on Mashiro, but the room was empty. Yuki rushed outside to look for her. Meanwhile, Mashiro chased a little kitten into the woods, leading her to a dilapidated bridge where the kitten stopped. Suddenly, she noticed something indistinct under the bridge, gnawing at something. It noticed her and slowly crawled towards her at a surprisingly fast pace. It turned out to be an old man, not as frightening as she had imagined. Mashiro offered him a piece of soft candy. His eyes were blank, yet he seemed able to see. After accepting the candy, he pulled out a severed finger from his mouth and handed it to Mashiro. Yuki found a butterfly that Mashiro had folded and continued to follow it, eventually finding Mashiro on the bridge. The old man was nowhere to be seen. Meanwhile, Daigo and Keisuke drank several rounds. The person next to Keisuke was his younger brother, Yosuke. Suddenly, a fight broke out nearby. Keisuke nonchalantly reassured them, smashing a plate. The fighting stopped almost instantly, revealing Keisuke's substantial influence in the Goto family. Upon returning home, Daigo found his wife lying sideways on the floor and asked if she was hinting at an upcoming hormone yoga, but she pushed him away and pointed to some carved words on the doorstep. Daigo didn't care much, assuming it was someone practicing their calligraphy. Yuki relayed Mashiro's running around, mentioning her tendency to get lost often. Daigo went to his daughter's room, touched her head, and she handed him a box of soft candy. Inside was a severed finger. Suddenly, Yuki called Daigo to take a bath. To avoid worrying his wife, Daigo pocketed the severed finger and nonchalantly went to bathe. The next day, the village head, who was also Keisuke's father, made a lengthy proclamation about bear hunting. Keisuke, fed up with the long speeches, led people directly into the forest. Seeing this, the village head hurriedly ended his speech and everyone excitedly entered the forest. Once in the forest, they dispersed. The uncle soon discovered a pile of bear droppings, still warm and with traces of white hair. It seemed the bear had eaten their granny. A line of bear tracks led to Keisuke, who declared that this bear was his prey now. Daigo and Yosuke teamed up for the exploration, with Yosuke constantly nervous. Daigo took the gun from him, afraid that he would accidentally fire a bullet. After a few more steps, Yosuke froze as a bear charged at them, specifically at Daigo. The bear knocked him down and almost killed him, but Yosuke managed to shoot the bear just in time. Upon hearing the bear's death, Keisuke told everyone that the problem was solved, implying his granny wasn't killed by a bear. The village women, hearing of the bear's demise, were elated, believing Granny Goto's spirit could now rest. They hurriedly prepared a meal to celebrate that evening. It seemed the granny was once the village's highest authority. A woman named Kanako disagreed, saying they were all glad the granny was dead, before leaving. Later, the villagers dissected the bear's stomach, finding the other half of the granny's glasses. After taking a few photos, Daigo noticed the Goto family praying. They then began eating raw bear meat, believing that by consuming it, Granny Goto would live on within them. Daigo reluctantly tried a piece but ended up spitting it out, much to a black dog's delight. After dinner, Daigo drove his wife and daughter home. Mashiro was already asleep in the back seat. Yuki said she was such an irresponsible mother. Daigo told her it was his fault. When he was attacked by the bear today, he thought he was going to die. But his wife and daughter gave him the strength to fight back, providing the chance to kill the bear. At that very moment, a doctor called. Apparently, Daigo had secretly sent a finger to him the day before, asking him to compare it with the granny's DNA. It turned out it wasn't hers. The finger belonged to someone else. This suggested that at least 2 people had recently died in the village. The doctor promised to continue the comparison with other suspicious individuals and would notify Daigo if there were any updates. Daigo chose not to tell Yuki about this, not wanting to worry his wife. On the street, a bespectacled girl watched Daigo's departing car with a look of resentment. Elsewhere, the old man with white eyes examined a piece of soft candy, wondering if it would taste good. The next day, the funeral procession of the Goto family grandly set off. Meanwhile, Daigo and Yuki dropped their daughter off at a nearby school. The teachers and students were friendly. Knowing that Mashiro was mute, they had drawn pictures and written messages in a notebook to give to her as a gift. Yuki urged Mashiro to accept the gift, but Mashiro seemed not to hear, her attention entirely on the distant road. The granny's funeral procession happened to be passing by. The faces of the funeral goers were strictly covered with white cloth. A school teacher explained that this was the funeral custom of the flower-offering village. No one in the funeral procession could show their face. As Daigo and Yuki were about to leave, they noticed that the funeral procession had suddenly stopped. It turned out that Keisuke found an extra person among them. He asked everyone to remove their white coverings to reveal who the extra person was. After everyone had removed their coverings, only a short person was left who was reluctant to do so. Everyone was ready to uncover his cloth, but Daigo sensed something was wrong and planned to go over. When Keisuke pulled off the person's covering, it turned out to be the bespectacled girl from the night before. Her name was Sumire, the daughter of the previous county police officer Kano. Keisuke thought she had left the village, but Sumire replied it's all their fault and demanded him to tell her where her father was. The uncle grabbed Sumire's sexy body and told her that her father disappeared on his own after going mad. Daigo arrived and stopped the uncle. Sumire ran over and kicked over the cylinder containing the corpse. As expected, it was empty. Sumire claimed that just as she thought, there wouldn't be a body inside, because the body has already been eaten by these people. She accused the Goto family of being all cannibals. Upon hearing this, the funeral procession fell into chaos. The Goto family urged Sumire to apologize to their deceased granny immediately. Suddenly, someone rushed out to grab the uncle's long hair and pulled it off. It seems it was the old man with white eyes, as shown earlier. He reached out to touch Sumire, but Keisuke stepped forward and held the old man back, then told Daigo to quickly take Sumire away from there. Confused, Daigo grabbed Sumire and ran. This family was quite strange. When Daigo returned home, he told his wife that he had to make a trip to the station. Yuki told Daigo to be careful. When she came out to see, there was a young girl sitting in the car. On the road, Daigo asked Sumire what had happened and if she was serious about the Goto family being cannibals. Sumire explained about a practice called endocannibalism, where they believed that by consuming the body of the deceased, they could inherit their spirit and soul. Daigo was somewhat convinced, having previously seen the Goto family sharing bear meat. Keisuke's reasoning at the time seemed to align with this concept. In reality, the local tribe of Papua New Guinea maintained this endocannibalism culture until the 1950s. Sumire believed in this because her father had told her before his disappearance that the Goto family were cannibals. She was sure that her father's disappearance was related to the Goto family. Her officer father had always been diligent and had never played marbles or thought about resigning. Those were all lies made up by the Goto family. As Daigo was leaving, he saw the Goto family hauling in firewood. Sumire recalled the last time she saw her father. After Kano made a phone call, he said he was going to the Goto residence. Sumire noticed something was off about her father. His expression was terrifying. She pleaded with him to sever ties with the Goto family. Kano mentioned a weasel that had recently made its nest under their roof, and he told Sumire to be kind to the creature. Sumire was confused by his words. After this, her father left in his police car. The rest of the story matched the scene from the beginning, where Kano went to the Goto family's old house and knocked on the door. Sumire naturally reported the incident to the police, but the officers believed Kano had gone mad, and therefore considered his daughter mad as well. They didn't believe Sumire. She asked Daigo if he believed her. Daigo didn't reply. As Sumire was about to get out of the car, Daigo told her that her father had only been missing for 2 weeks and might still be alive. Sumire asked Daigo to be careful if he decided to investigate. On the way back, Daigo ate a sausage and sneaked a cigarette, afraid his wife would smell the smoke. He even took off his jacket. He was planning to investigate the Goto family. As he was approaching, a tree fell, nearly hitting him. The ones chopping the tree were the same men who were hauling the firewood earlier. One of them, a bearded man named Hitman, whose main role is to watch the family business with his big muscles, said that this was the Goto family's land. It seemed they knew Daigo was coming to investigate and had been waiting for him. Daigo stated that he was investigating the disappearance of Officer Kano and needed to visit the Goto house. He asked them to move the tree. Hitman pulled out a phone and played a video of Kano from the day he had come knocking. In the video, Kano was shouting and appeared mad, but his words repeatedly accused them of being cannibals. Daigo thanked the man for the clue and said he would take the video into account, but he still needed to investigate and asked them to move the tree. Hitman started his chainsaw with a roar. His partner looked surprised, thinking they were about to escalate the situation, but Hitman only helped Daigo cut the fallen tree. Daigo continued his investigation. Hitman's partner asked if they were just going to let him investigate. Hitman seemed to mean that it was out of his hands now, and that someone else would decide. Yuki picked up Mashiro from school and asked her on the way home if she enjoyed school. Mashiro squeezed her mother's hand, indicating that it was okay. Suddenly, someone called out to them. It was Mashiro's classmate and his parents, who happened to be going the same way, so they walked together. The little boy saw butterflies in the field and easily caught one with his cap. On the way, the boy's mother told Yuki that she heard her husband had been to the Goto house for a drink and advised her to avoid getting involved with the Goto family in the future. She mentioned their values were different from ordinary people and they were like savages. Yuki wondered if all of the villagers were cannibals. As they parted ways, the little boy gave the butterfly he caught to Mashiro. Mashiro accepted it but didn't say anything. As they left, the friendly neighbor again cautioned Yuki to be careful. On the other side, the Goto family had just finished burying their granny when Keisuke received a phone call from Hitman. He found out that Daigo was heading to the Goto's main house for an investigation. Upon hearing this, the uncle said they should go get him, but Keisuke quickly stopped him, reminding him that Daigo was a police officer and deserved some respect. However, the uncle and a few others ignored him and set off, with Keisuke's younger brother Yosuke also wanting to join. Keisuke stopped him, telling him not to get involved. In the meantime, Daigo had arrived at the main house in his police car. This was the same house that Kano had knocked on before. Daigo knocked on the door, and someone upstairs opened a window and started to record him with a camera. Daigo shouted at them to stop filming and come down for a talk. Just then, the uncle and his group arrived. Daigo explained he was just there to ask some questions. One of them asked if he suspected they had killed Officer Kano. The uncle aimed his gun at Daigo, warning him to leave. Stubborn, Daigo refused to leave and wanted to know why they were so eager to get rid of him. The uncle pointed the gun at Daigo's head, ready to shoot. If Daigo didn't dodge, he would have been dead. The uncle bit the gun barrel and taunted him that he knew Daigo had killed someone in the past. Before he could finish, Daigo knocked him out with the butt of his gun. He proceeded to take down a number of others. One tried to choke him, intending to push Daigo off. Instead, Daigo kicked him down. The beaten man warned that Daigo just attacked the Goto family. That person wouldn't let this slide. Who was this person he referred to? The man climbed up Daigo's legs while declaring that he had broken the rule of Flower Offering Village not to get involved with the Goto family. Then he wet himself. Annoyed, Daigo knocked him out again. The scene switched to Yuki returning home with Mashiro. They were surprised to find Keisuke and several others waiting there. Hitman arrived and handed out guns. Keisuke glanced at Yuki's feet, asking if she usually wore slippers. Yuki was puzzled by his words, but Keisuke clarified that she should at least wear something she could run in. Mashiro dropped the box she was holding in fear, and the butterfly flew away. Daigo's phone kept ringing, but he was too busy dragging the defeated men into the police car to answer. The caller was the doctor from before. He left a voicemail for Daigo saying that the owner of the severed finger has been identified. It's none other than the missing county officer, Kano. Suddenly, a group of elders rushed out, pleading with Daigo not to take their children. This is Goto land. Any issues with the Goto family should be decided by that person. Daigo wondered who that person was and demanded that person to meet him. But suddenly the old man with white eyes appeared behind the officer, slashing with a knife towards his head. The next scene shifts to Daigo being dragged away by the white-eyed old man. During the process, Daigo's phone fell out. Daigo didn't die, but woke up in the hospital later. As soon as he opened his eyes, he saw his wife. Yuki told him that the village fire department had found him unconscious by the river and then sent him to the hospital. Daigo recalled that he was attacked by the elderly man. If he hadn't dodged, he would have been killed. Keisuke, along with some people from the Goto family, came to the hospital. Yuki said that Keisuke had been with him at the hospital all the time, unlike the brutal members of the Goto family. Keisuke apologized to Daigo, then brought out a man who said that Daigo's head injury was caused by his twin brother. He apologized on behalf of his brother, who had turned himself into the police and was being investigated. Daigo thought back to the tall old man who attacked him, firmly believing that the one who attacked him couldn't be his short brother. Keisuke said there was no such old man in the Goto family. Hearing this, Daigo claimed the Goto family always refer to him that way. It's that person who almost killed him. The man had a particularly bad smell. There was also a tall man at the funeral that day who had the same smell, and he thought they were the same person. Before leaving, Keisuke mentioned that some people hadn't turned themselves in, and he didn't know what they would do. He then left. Daigo pulled out his IV, asked the police station to protect his wife and daughter, and decided to continue dealing with the Goto family. As he was leaving, he reached into his pocket to find his phone. But the fire department didn't know. They didn't see his phone by the river. Despite having 13 stitches in his head and his wife's objections, Daigo stubbornly left, intending to arrest the Gotos. On the other hand, Daigo's lost phone was picked up by the uncle. He was listening to the doctor's voicemail to Daigo. The finger was Officer Kano's, and human saliva was detected on it. In other words, Kano had been eaten by someone. The uncle thought this was bad. He took Daigo's phone and texted the doctor. The doctor suddenly received a text saying he wanted to meet the doctor for a discussion. Elsewhere, Daigo drove Yuki and Mashiro home to pack their things, and found that Sumire was already there. Seeing Daigo's wounds, Sumire knew he had fought with the Goto family. Daigo was sure that the Goto family was hiding something and her father might still be alive. Sumire was grateful. She came here to provide clues and gave Daigo her father's call history before he disappeared. The last phone number was strange, like a pyramid scheme number. This was the last call to her father. Sumire had tried to call back, but no one answered. Sumire told Daigo to be careful and not repeat her mistakes. Before getting in the car, she added, although the people of the Goto family were all mad, Keisuke was different. After Sumire left, Yuki came out and asked Daigo to explain what was going on. The former Officer Kano disappeared and her husband almost died. She was pretty worried about her family and said if she felt threatened, she would take Mashiro and leave. Daigo said maybe it's better if the two of them leave. Hearing this, Yuki was completely angry, but Daigo stopped her and told her about the night when Mashiro gave him a finger, which he suspected could be Kano's. Officer Kano might have been killed. It's better if she and Mashiro leave for the moment. So, Daigo drove Yuki and Mashiro to the police station, while the white-eyed old man was watching everything from a hidden place. After arriving at the police station, a crowd had gathered on the balcony, all keen to catch a glimpse of Daigo. Apparently, his reputation was quite high. Daigo explained the details of his investigation to the chief of police. Upon hearing that Kano may have been murdered, the chief asked Daigo for evidence. The evidence was a severed finger, but it was not currently with Daigo. The chief then questioned Daigo, asking if he had once again mistreated the Goto family, leading to their attack. Moreover, Kano had indeed submitted a resignation letter. The chief advised Daigo again to stay away from the Goto family. It turns out that the chief also grew up in the village, so he knew what kind of people the Goto family were. Yet seeing Daigo's tenacity, the chief assigned 2 officers to investigate Kano's disappearance and resignation, looking for any suspicions. The chief, considering Daigo as a victim and worrying that his involvement could hinder the investigation, asked him to stay away from the case. Just then, a call came into the station from the doctor. Daigo picked up the phone, and indeed it was the doctor on the line, but at that moment, he was being held hostage by the uncle and his gang. The doctor, under duress, asked to meet Daigo in person and asked if he could come to the hospital. Daigo agreed and said he would be right over. The uncle then broke the doctor's finger. Daigo visited his family and was delighted to see his daughter smiling. Mashiro's mood seemed to have improved recently. Daigo told his family that he was going to the hospital, and after gathering some information, he would withdraw from the case. He apologized for his reckless actions. Yuki agreed and told him to be quick. Daigo then left with another officer and headed for the hospital. Suddenly, a garbage truck ahead swung open its doors, and the uncle, gun in hand, fired at Daigo. A car suddenly smashed into them from behind, knocking Daigo unconscious. In his unconscious state, he remembered his tragic past. Every time Daigo arrested criminals, he couldn't control himself and beat them up. Even when Mashiro wrote an essay, she mentioned her house has many medals awarded for her dad catching the criminals, but she thought her dad was a violent cop. When this statement came out, all the parents looked at Mashiro. Sometimes when the criminals had no strength to fight back, her dad would still punch them a few more times. It seems that Daigo really had a tendency toward violence. In the end, Mashiro finished her essay with a plea, urging all adults not to beat or shout at children. The classmates went crazy and cheered for Mashiro. Apparently, these kids had been disciplined often by their parents. Daigo even laughed when he read Mashiro's essay, considering her a real talent. But Yuki snatched the essay and scolded him. After playing with Mashiro for a while, Daigo turned around and saw a creepy man smiling at Mashiro. Mashiro called out and ran over to him. Yuki and Daigo stopped Mashiro, and the creepy man ran away as soon as he saw this. Daigo caught up with the man and gave him a beating without any explanation. It turned out that the creepy man had been arrested by Daigo in the past for pedophilia and was currently on probation. Daigo thought that the man had returned for Mashiro and warned him to stay away from her. A few days later, several child molestation cases occurred in the vicinity, and the police identified the creepy man as the prime suspect. Once during surveillance, Daigo's partner told him that the last time he arrested the creepy man, he insisted he hadn't touched Mashiro. Daigo replied that when he was beating the man until his nose bled, he said he really loved Mashiro, so he couldn't touch her. Suddenly, someone spoke over the radio. An 8-year-old girl had voluntarily entered the suspect's house. Thinking that it could be Mashiro, Daigo rushed over, leaving the police dumbfounded because they hadn't even given the action order yet. Arriving at the creepy man front door, Daigo knocked a few times but received no answer. However, he faintly heard Mashiro's voice. Wrapping his hand in his jacket, Daigo shattered the glass door with a single punch. He saw the creepy man holding Mashiro's hand, his belt still undone. With a swift flying kick, Daigo knocked the man to the ground. Old and new grievances fueled his punches, hitting the man until his nose bled. His partner quickly intervened to stop him. Unexpectedly, Mashiro shielded the creepy man, stating that she had come to say goodbye to him willingly, and the man hadn't done anything bad to her. She defended that even though he had done bad things before, she didn't hate him. It's because no one treated him kindly that he became strange. In the man's hand was a paper butterfly that Mashiro had given him. Upon hearing her words, Daigo was moved to tears. Suddenly, the man lashed out, slashing Daigo's leg with a knife and kidnapping Mashiro. He told Mashiro she couldn't imagine life without her and proposed to die together. Saying so, he held the knife to Mashiro's throat. Without hesitation, Daigo shot and killed the creepy man. After his death, Mashiro only smelled the blood and fainted. Subsequently, she developed autism and stopped speaking entirely. And that is the tragic past of Daigo. The story returns to the tunnel. A vehicle had smashed the police car into a wreck. Luckily, both Daigo and his partner were safe. The uncle, along with the members of the Goto family, started their assault, guns in hand. Their mission is to kill Daigo. Daigo asked his partner to call for backup while he took cover behind the car door, waiting for the right moment to strike. He was determined to show them his shooting skills. After an intense firefight, Daigo managed to overpower the uncle, landing punch after punch until he bled. The uncle taunted, if he killed him, he would never find Kano. He confessed that he had killed Kano and he did it all by himself, all to protect the Goto family. Daigo remembered the scene where he killed the creepy man. In the end, he didn't shoot the uncle, but the uncle and his group were arrested. The uncle confessed to his crime, claiming he killed Officer Kano. Under his guidance, the police found Kano's skeletal remains in the mountains, many parts missing. The uncle insisted he acted alone, but Daigo concluded that other members of the Goto family were involved. The uncle took sole responsibility in order to protect his family. Daigo claimed that his head injury was caused by a tall, old man, but the chief said that the villagers denied the existence of such a person. The chief warned Daigo to stop meddling with the Goto family since they are extraordinarily unified. As they spoke, Keisuke and some Goto family members arrived. After glancing at the uncle, they moved to the skeletal remains and began to pray. Daigo couldn't stand it, asking if they were all putting on a show. Keisuke turned and said he didn't expect him to understand. Daigo broke the news of Kano's death to Sumire, who broke down in tears. Though she had mentally prepared herself, the concrete news was still too much to bear. The chief asked Daigo about his future plans and suggested a transfer to another village where a local officer was retiring. He warned Daigo about the unusual nature of the flowers-offering village and the possible dangers involving the Goto family. Daigo said he would seriously consider it. He then told Yuki about the potential transfer. Yuki suggested letting Mashiro decide, so they asked her if she wanted to return to the village. Mashiro, looking at the dialogue book her classmates made for her, nodded. Since Mashiro wanted to go back, they decided not to move. Daigo lifted Mashiro onto his shoulders, and she even giggled a little. And so the family happily returned to the flowers-offering village. After returning, Daigo gradually let go of the Goto family matters and started helping the villagers with various tasks. Whether it was changing a light bulb or fixing a fence, he was there. As a token of gratitude, the old lady gave him a box of organic peaches. Mashiro often had a smile on her face, and the family of 3 seemed to be living a flavorful life. One evening, Daigo spotted the spot where they had written. It had been taped over by Yuki. He remembered the call log that Sumire had provided from before Kano's death. He started looking through it and tried calling the last number, which seemed like a telemarketing call, but it couldn't be reached. Daigo found there were more such numbers and tried the rest. They rang, but no one answered. The next day, the villagers held a gathering. Almost everyone came except the Goto family. The man who found Daigo by the river was a firefighter from the village fire department. There was also a gentleman called Satake, who got drunk in a few minutes. Satake said that the village had a serious aging problem and young people like the firefighter were rare. Daigo commented that there were quite a few young people in the Goto family. The room went silent at his words. Taking the opportunity, Satake spoke up. He said the village and the Goto family, although together, were completely different. He claimed responsibility for Officer Kano's death, as the village's economy was mainly dependent on forestry, which was controlled by the Goto family. The villagers had to work and needed a source of income, so they had to work for the Goto family. They chose to turn a blind eye to the conflict between Kano and the Goto family out of fear. Satake expressed regret and apologized to Daigo, then started crying like an old baby. Mashiro gave Satake a handkerchief to wipe his tears. Daigo didn't say anything about the villagers' non-interference, allowing them to continue drinking. The atmosphere became cheerful again. The next day, Daigo and Yuki reminisced about Daigo killing the creepy man. No matter what, they must support each other and overcome the difficulties. They hoped to make Mashiro speak again. While talking, they started wrestling their tongues. Just when they were in the heat of passion, a pair of eyes was peeping at Daigo from outside the window. Shocked, Daigo chased out to find it was the yellow-haired short man from the Goto family. To make things worse, he had sprayed "murderer" on their wall. Satake drove over asking who did it. Seeing Yuki come over with a bucket, Satake also went to help clean up. Meanwhile, Daigo drove to the lumber mill at a fast speed, grabbed the short man, ready to make his nose bleed. The short man turned his swollen face to Daigo, having been beaten by Keisuke. Keisuke said this guy came back bragging about what he saw and that he was about to take him to the police station, hoping that he would spare his nose. Daigo asked if the graffiti on his wall was his doing. The man saw the graffiti but denied doing it. Apart from the Goto family, Daigo couldn't think of who else could do such a thing. The man said not to trust the villagers too much as they were all scum. They might act humble towards them, but it was all pretense. Keisuke also warned not to trust them too much. On the other hand, Mr. Satake helped Yuki put the water bucket away. His sneaky behavior suggested that he too had something to hide. Sumire visited her mother in the mental hospital, but her mother asked who she was. Poor Sumire. Her father died tragically and her mother had lost her sanity. She kept saying "run, run," even mimicking writing on the walls. It could be inferred that the words etched on Daigo's doorstep were her doing. Meanwhile, the graffiti elsewhere had left Yuki feeling uneasy. Many villagers were also sneakily stealing glances at their family. The word "run" was not only on the doorstep but etched in other places as well, suggesting that this place was dangerous. Not far away, Satake was surprisingly wearing headphones and using binoculars to monitor Daigo's family. Inside the lumber yard, after the Goto family members left, the villagers all bowed deeply. They occasionally had bloodstains on them, which was baffling. It felt like an invisible evil force was slowly closing in on Daigo's family, but it was not clear what it was. Daigo bought a fence, intending to enclose his home, but Satake appeared again, advising them against it. He said the village was built on mutual trust. Putting up a fence would upset people and they should be more mindful. Daigo muttered, "What a nuisance," but Satake heard it loud and clear. His expression changed. Yuki quickly said they would dismantle it and wouldn't install it. Satake still politely said goodbye. After he left, Yuki also noticed something was amiss. Every time they did something, Satake would appear as if he knew beforehand. The next day, Daigo noticed the villagers were unusually cold towards him. Many people said fighting was wrong as soon as they saw him, while others closed their doors upon seeing him. This village was really strange. At this time, the firefighter came driving by and explained the situation to Daigo. He heard that Satake had given him some advice yesterday, and he got so angry he grabbed his collar. On hearing this, Daigo said the old man liked to joke. There was no fight. The firefighter said that Satake might have exaggerated a bit, but Daigo did find him annoying. After getting home, Daigo saw his wife dressed up and ready to leave. She couldn't take it anymore because people kept coming to their house to advise her to apologize to Satake. Daigo stopped her, insisting that they couldn't give in now and refused to bow down. Suddenly, Satake, wearing a raincoat, rushed in and said, "How can a husband and wife fight?" Seeing him, Daigo was instantly enraged, challenging him if he was monitoring their every move. Satake retorted that this was not the time for such words. Seeing Yuki, Daigo chose to compromise and formally apologize to Satake. In satisfaction, Satake left, saying humility is the foundation of life in their village. Satake added that they should prepare for the Offering Festival, the most grand event in the village held annually for hundreds of years. The climax of the festival is the burning of a human-shaped effigy. The next day, Daigo attended the festival with his wife and daughter. The villagers knew about the couple's argument, thanks to Satake's loose talk. Daigo muttered that the man's mouth was like a pit. It's so defamatory. Still, news spread quickly, and by the next day, everyone in the village knew about Daigo's apology to Satake. Their attitudes instantly changed, and everyone became friendly again. While Daigo was changing his shoes, he received a phone call. The number looked like those used by telemarketers, but he decided to answer it anyway. He took the call in a secluded spot. The caller asked where Daigo had gotten the number. Daigo told the truth, and the caller asked him to confirm if anyone was around. After a quick look around and moving further into the secluded area, the caller admitted that he was the one who contacted Kano via satellite phone. He asked Daigo to meet him alone the next day. Daigo mentioned that after Kano's last call with him, Kano had gone to the Goto family and was murdered. The caller insisted that Kano's last call was not with him. "Then who was it with?" asked Daigo, but the caller hung up, sending Daigo a set of coordinates with a message, telling Daigo to meet him there at 11 a.m. tomorrow. Early the next morning, Daigo drove to the location, a seemingly abandoned shopping mall. Upon entering, he heard a loudspeaker directing him to turn right. Noticing the surveillance cameras, he followed the loudspeaker's instructions to the meeting spot. A man appeared on the other side of the glass, saying that Kano, the county police officer, was not only killed, but also eaten. Daigo had heard this before, so he didn't pay much attention. He was interested in who the mysterious man was. The mysterious man claimed to be a person not allowed to exist in the village, and that he was the secret they were hiding. Confused, Daigo asked him to be straightforward. The man removed his mask, revealing a terrifying hollow face. The hollow face began his story from 18 years ago when he was just a child in the flower offering village. He vaguely remembered an offering festival where a tall figure appeared amidst eerie music and began to eat him, leaving his face hollow. He couldn't remember what happened next, but when he came to, his mother was carrying him as they ran out of the village. They lived in hiding, changing their names, and when he grew up, he realized he didn't have a family register, presumably the work of the village. They deliberately created people without a family register to avoid potential trouble. Obviously, it was for eating people, but he wasn't sure why. Until his mother's death, she didn't reveal much to him, so he wanted to investigate why the village ate people. After finishing his story, he put on his mask and prepared to leave. Daigo called out to him, but the hollow face replied that in the coming offering festival, there might be others like him who would be eaten, and then he left. At this moment, within a mysterious archaeological site in the village, there was an altar. Keisuke had placed 2 ribs on the altar and then struck the ground several times with a staff. The next day, only a pile of ribs was left, some of which were covered in maggots. The villagers had been rehearsing for an upcoming festival. Daigo was late because he had an appointment with the hollow face. Satake asked him where he had been, but the old lady spoke up, saying he was so nosy. Suddenly, a refined man dressed in white appeared. He was the new priest of the local shrine. From the conversations, it was clear that his grandfather would not participate in the offering festival this year because he was stepping down next year. He was to succeed his grandfather and become the shrine priest. What the shrine priest did was unknown, so the offering festival was presided over by him as a warm-up activity before taking over. The villagers congratulated him on becoming the shrine's new priest one after another. After that, the priest came to chat with Daigo. He leaned close to Daigo's ear and asked if they could step aside to talk. So in the dead of night, the two met secretly. The priest advised Daigo to leave the village, warning him that if he kept this up, he would end up like Kano. The villagers here impose their rules on outsiders, but Daigo said it was fine because his daughter had started smiling again since coming to the village. Besides, it was his daughter who wanted to return to the village. For her sake, Daigo would not leave easily. The priest said that 100 years ago, the offering festival was a human sacrificial ceremony. The village was poor at that time, with not much food, so they killed children to reduce the number of people to feed. Daigo asked if they ate them after they killed them. Suddenly, the villagers realized that Daigo was missing again. The priest quickly handed Daigo a business card for contact. As he was speaking, Satake led a group over, asking them what they were secretly chatting about. The priest replied that they were discussing the shrine. Satake said they didn't suspect Officer Daigo. Besides, he couldn't keep secrets in the village. The next day, Yuki picked up Mashiro to take her home. Mashiro was still smiling brightly. When they got home, they found Daigo rummaging through their belongings. He was convinced that their house was bugged. Yuki stopped him and asked him not to scare their daughter. Daigo looked at Mashiro and stopped his search. Just then, a text message arrived. Daigo looked at it and became nervous. The hollow face had asked to meet him that night at the M Hotel. In the evening, the villagers gathered once again. They kept asking Yuki to pour drinks, and Daigo was not happy about this. He confronted Satake for ordering his wife to serve them drinks, but he didn't bother to explain and excused himself to go to the bathroom. Instead, he slipped out of the bathroom window, drove out of the village, and went to the M Hotel. The person in the room was not the hollow face, but an independent investigator named Utada. It was the hollow face who had asked Daigo to find Utada. Utada ran a website called Chronicles, which specialized in recording strange and bizarre events. Among these events, the custom of cannibalism was the one that intrigued Utada the most. One day, the hollow face found him and showed him her face to prove the existence of a cannibal village. Utada had once asked the hollow face to post an article on his website and, through the hollow face, got to know the county police officer Kano. However, Utada didn't know much about the hollow face's background. The hollow face always took the initiative to contact him. Later, Utada and Kano began to look for evidence of cannibalism in the village. They indeed found some evidence. They were eating children without registered identities. Some kids in the village had their identities hidden from birth, raised only to be eaten. Therefore, somewhere in the village, there must be children who would be eaten at the offering festival. The most direct evidence was the unusually high rate of stillbirths in the village, with at least one recorded case per year. The village school only had 10 students. Isn't this rate terrifying? A month before Kano disappeared, he suddenly lost contact. Upon hearing this, Daigo noticed something was wrong, because before Kano disappeared, he had taken a phone call right before going to the Goto house. If that call wasn't to contact Utada, and it wasn't to contact the hollow face, then who could it have been? Utada believed that it could be someone from the village. There could be a traitor among them. This resonated with Daigo. He had been thinking the same thing. Suddenly, someone rang the doorbell. It was a call girl that Utada had called. Seeing this, Daigo didn't want to be a peeping Tom and left the room. Back in the village, the gathering continued. Suddenly, a woman arrived. She was overjoyed to see Mashiro and couldn't resist hugging her tightly. Yuki noticed her and came over to ask questions. The woman let go of Mashiro and started apologizing to Yuki. Satake came over and explained that the woman was his daughter, Kanako. About 3 years ago, Kanako had a stillbirth, but Kanako retorted that her child was alive. Satake forcibly dragged her away. Yuki noticed that Kanako's back was covered in injuries, and Kanako kept shouting, "Her baby was breathing. Her child was taken by Granny Goto. Give her child back." Yuki looked at the eerily calm people at the drinking table. By the time Daigo returned, the gathering had already disbanded. Yuki told him about what had just occurred. Satake had been beating his daughter. The next day, Daigo tried to investigate Satake in his capacity as a police officer. However, Satake refused to open the door, and he didn't admit to beating his daughter. Daigo saw Kanako by the window, approached her, and asked if she could tell him how her child was taken away by Granny Goto, but Satake quickly pulled Kanako away. Frustrated, Daigo asked his wife to try and get close to Kanako, hoping she could coax some information out of her. Meanwhile, he called the shrine priest, hoping to meet with him again. The scene shifts to the Goto family, where a ceremony is held to honor Granny Goto. Keisuke's father announced that Keisuke would inherit the headship of the Goto family next week, requesting the granny's spirit to watch over him. In the back of the room, an unknown person got up and left. The following day, Yuki saw Kanako sitting on the stairs smoking. She used smoking as an excuse to approach her. Kanako handed Yuki a cigarette, and while they were talking, several children ran up. They were deliberately running in front of Kanako to annoy her. Yuki started coughing from the cigarette smoke, and Kanako realized she didn't know how to smoke and asked her to say it if she had something to say. Yuki asked Kanako to make time to visit Daigo and explain in detail about her child being taken away by Granny Goto. Upon hearing this, Kanako walked away, saying she was told not to mention this anymore. Yuki chased after her, adding that her husband was reliable and would definitely help her, but Kanako just walked away. Meanwhile, Daigo visited the shrine. The priest explained that since the war, the villagers had been afraid of the Goto family, who were landlords. In recent years, there had been some conflicts between the villagers and Granny Goto. Many women believed that Granny Goto had taken and killed their children. Daigo wondered why could the granny take the children. As it turned out, Granny Goto used to be the only midwife in the village. Whenever a baby was about to be born, Granny Goto would be the one to deliver it, which gave her the opportunity to steal children. However, the priest didn't believe these rumors, warning Daigo that for now any theories were without evidence. On the other side, another piece of meat appeared on the altar of the mysterious ruins. It must have been that white-eyed old man who ate it. In the night, while her father was sleeping, Kanako quietly left the house without even changing her shoes. It was raining heavily outside. She found Daigo, intending to tell him everything. Satake soon realized that Kanako was missing and dialed a phone number. From Kanako's words, Daigo confirmed that the child she gave birth to was indeed taken away by Granny Goto, who claimed the baby was dead. But Kanako clearly saw the baby's hand move at that time. No matter how much she struggled, it was in vain. She watched the granny take the baby away, a faint smile on her face. Suddenly, Yuki called. She said Satake was coming with a lot of his men. Daigo had to take Kanako back. After Satake scolded Kanako, a bully villager grabbed Daigo's hair and asked why he was always snooping around. Daigo broke his hand and knocked him down, openly stating that he was investigating the Goto family. Because no one would tell him anything, he had to do it himself. He wanted to know why everyone feared the Goto family, and it wasn't just because of work. Satake saw that Daigo was still strong and didn't dare to be too reckless. Daigo also saw that the other side was numerous and didn't dare to fight. Both sides glared at each other with hate before parting ways. Yuki didn't understand why Daigo was still investigating the Goto family. He said that it was so they could survive in the village. Later, the bully villager went to the Goto family to talk about his beating and suggested they simply kill Daigo for good. When he looked at Keisuke, Keisuke looked at his shotgun. Daigo went home and connected all the clues, coming up with an important point. It's the place where they were hiding the kidnapped children. Just as he was thinking, someone honked outside. It was Keisuke, inviting Daigo to hunt. Despite some hesitation, Daigo went along. As he was leaving, Yuki asked if he could come back early in the night. Daigo just grunted and left. The two walked into the forest. Keisuke asked if he was still investigating them. Daigo acknowledged this, saying he wanted to silence him here, just go ahead. Keisuke pointed his shotgun, saying Daigo killed to protect his daughter and he would kill to protect the Goto family. Daigo thought Keisuke had missed his shot, but Keisuke was actually aiming at a fawn. He then bowed to the fawn and proceeded to kill it, saying everything tastes better when it's small. In the shadows, a fat man was watching Keisuke's every move. He then told Hitman about Keisuke not killing Daigo. Hitman wasn't surprised, as if he had expected it. Hitman said, "After all, Keisuke is the future head of the family. They have to do the dirty work." When Daigo got home, he found the house empty. There was a feast on the dining table. Opening the fridge, he found a cake with "Happy Birthday to Mashiro" written on it. It suddenly dawned on him that it was his daughter's birthday. "Where is everyone?" Daigo took out his phone and saw that Yuki had called him more than 10 times. He quickly called her back. Yuki's voice was nervous, saying Mashiro is missing again. She's been looking everywhere and can't find her. Yuki had no choice but to go to Satake. Satake said he would contact the fire department right away. Kanako's eyes were unfocused in the house, as if she wanted to say something. After Daigo met with Yuki, Satake came with the fire department. Satake assured him not to worry and they would find their daughter. Daigo retorted, asking him not to play the good guy. If Mashiro was kidnapped, they were all involved and he would kill them all. The conflict escalated completely, and it seemed like a fierce battle was unavoidable. In the forest, Mashiro and a little boy were catching fireflies by the river. It seemed that Mashiro didn't get lost on her own, but was invited to play by the boy. Kanako, holding a flashlight, found them. On the other side, Yuki received a call that her daughter was found. Dismayed, Daigo wondered if he was wrong to suspect the villagers. Satake laughed heartily, saying he was being impulsive and his terrified expression just now reminded him of the county police officer Kano. The crowd laughed and left. Yuki found Mashiro by the river, and Kanako said that she loved to play by the river when she was a child, so she tried her luck here, and indeed found the little boy. The boy's mother kept apologizing as she held on to him. Back at home, Daigo asserted that this was a cannibalistic village, and Mashiro was kidnapped by the villagers to threaten him. Yuki believed that her husband was not considering the family at all, but was obsessed with investigating some groundless things. She then stormed off. The next day, Daigo met with the doctor, whose broken finger was almost healed. From the doctor, Daigo received an important clue about Officer Kano, who was not only investigating the cannibalism in the village, but also a contagious disease. Granny Goto had once been brought here for treatment, and at that time, she was forcibly dragged here by Officer Kano. Granny Goto could hardly walk on her own. Her hands and feet were constantly trembling, and she was frenzied, constantly letting out eerie chicken screams. The doctor had never seen such a disease, and thus conducted an investigation. He found that Granny Goto's symptoms were similar to Kuru disease. Kuru disease once broke out among the local tribe in Papua New Guinea due to the consumption of corpses. Simply put, it's poisoning from corpses. This means Granny Goto was also eating people. The reason Kano had a conflict with the villagers was that he kindly took the granny for treatment, while the villagers didn't want outsiders to know that they had this disease. The doctor later investigated the people who had visited the clinic from the village and found that in 1951, there was also a person in the village with Kuru disease. He even found the case record. The patient was only 6 years old and had no household registration. Upon calculating, Daigo realized that if the patient were alive today, they would be over 75 years old. Could it be the old man with the white eyes? The doctor was taken aback and said it was impossible. Kuru disease is fatal, so the patient couldn't possibly be alive. If they really are alive, there's only one explanation. The virus had mutated. In the evening, the villagers continued their final night of rehearsal. They actually burned a grass-made effigy. The priest explained that when the festival officially starts, they will burn 7 of these to offer to the heavens. In the past, they offered real people as sacrifices. What's the difference between this and a curse? Daigo thought of Utada's words. Somewhere in the village, there must be a child hidden who will be eaten on the day of the festival. He remembered the words Kano said to Sumire. If there really is such a child, where could they be? The scene shifts to Keisuke and his brother entering the tunnel, the same one discovered before Officer Kano disappeared. After opening a door, he tells Yosuke that only a select few from the Goto family know about this place, and he must not tell anyone else. Both of them put on hoods and step inside. There, children of different ages, meant to be used in different years, are hidden. Keisuke points to one and says, "This is the one to be used this year. It must be cleaned the day before and not fed anything. He used to do this work, but now it's his brother's turn." He tells his brother, this is something that the direct descendants of the Goto family must do, and don't think of them as human. In the evening, Daigo apologizes to his wife and decides to take them both and leave the village. They should pack their things right away and leave as soon as possible. Soon, the 3 of them hit the road. Before leaving, Daigo removes a GPS device from the car. He knew the villagers had installed one, but had never confronted them about it. Yuki had suspected this too, but for the sake of her family, she had always refused to believe that the villagers were cannibals. Not long after they started driving, Yuki noticed something off because they were going in circles. Daigo explained that someone was following them, and he was trying to lose them. He urged them to hold on tight as he floored the accelerator, weaving left and right on the mountain roads. Suddenly, a car darted out from a bend, pushing their tailing car off the hillside. The driver wasn't dead, but called Hitman to report that they'd lost their targets because a car had suddenly charged out. Hitman hung up without a word. It turns out that the car that had suddenly appeared had been arranged by Daigo beforehand, with his former partner providing cover. Daigo asked him to look after his wife and daughter, as he had to return to the village to continue his investigation. Yuki couldn't believe his decision, but he explained that all the victims were children. He wanted every child to experience a mother's love and care. Yuki thought about the children who might be Kanako's and agreed, but made Daigo promise to return safely. In the tunnel prison, Keisuke bathes a child. When he comes out, he encounters Hitman, who is worried that Yosuke might feel pity for the child. Keisuke says if he could do it, so could his brother. Hitman asks what if he couldn't? They couldn't afford another traitor in the family. The next day, the official Festival of Offerings begins. Before it starts, there's an inauguration ceremony in the Goto family. As Keisuke is about to leave, he receives a call from Sumire in the hospital. She says she is pregnant. It's obvious that Keisuke is the father. He hangs up without a word when he sees Hitman approaching. The fact that Sumire was pregnant was already hinted at previously when the old man with white eyes tried to touch her belly. All members of the Goto family gather in front of the old house for a group photo. Keisuke recalls a similar moment with Granny Goto when she was alive. She pointed at all the Goto family members and said, "Only they are humans in her eyes. The rest are beasts." But 16 years ago, a traitor emerged from the Goto family, worse than a beast, and met his end. It must have something to do with Yosuke, who had a strange expression and was deep in thought with his eyes closed. Keisuke reminds him to keep his head up. Later, when Yosuke is cutting the child's hair, he removes the hood, introduces himself to the child, and says, in his eyes, the boy is human, not a beast. Daigo has discreetly returned to the flower offering village. As he snoops around, Hitman appears. Daigo moves to perform his over-the-shoulder throw, only to find himself unable to move Hitman. In retaliation, Hitman throws Daigo down a slope, asking him what he's up to. Daigo reveals that he's heard a child will be eaten during the festival. When Hitman demands to know who told him, Daigo chuckles, implying there's a whistleblower among them. A fight ensues, but Daigo is no match for Hitman, a warrior who's invincible to physical attacks. Hitman wants to know who the whistleblower is. Daigo hints that it's someone close to him, then spits in Hitman's face. Enraged, Hitman unleashes a flurry of punches at Daigo's face. He then orders his men to take Daigo to the Goto household, where he is revived with a bucket of water. Goto family members surround him, a camera nearby recording the interrogation. Outside, Hitman informs his fat henchman about the traitor within the Goto family, deciding to find the culprit. Daigo, actually clueless about the traitor, had made the claim to stir up conflict within the Goto family. Despite the hostile crowd, he calmly explains his findings. A Goto descendant punches Daigo upon hearing about the child. Daigo spots some shattered tiles nearby and hatches a plan. As the man moves to kick him, Daigo falls onto the shattered tiles, buying time with his chatter while attempting to cut his bonds with a tile shard. Daigo taunts the man, who moves in to finish him off. At that moment, Daigo breaks free and restrains him. Just as they are at a standoff, someone knocks. Keisuke's father enters with the police chief. Surprised, Daigo asks why he's there. The chief reveals he was summoned by the village head and scolds Daigo for trespassing on Goto property. After making Daigo release the Goto descendant, the chief apologizes on his behalf, saying he won't pursue the assault since Daigo was the initial trespasser. They leave with Daigo. After they leave, Keisuke's father advises Keisuke to avoid conflict until the festival is over, reminding him of his new status as head of the family. On the way back, Daigo suspects the chief is a Goto ally and questions why he stopped his investigation. Instead, the chief leads him to a secret investigation unit on the top floor. The unit consists of 5 people investigating the Goto family. They're aware of Officer Kano's death and the bite marks on his body, but couldn't identify the perpetrator. Daigo suggests the culprit could be the Goto family's ultimate weapon, the old man with white eyes. The team urges him to share everything he knows. Daigo recounts his encounter with the white-eyed old man and shows the Goto family tree. He notes that the Goto matriarch only has one descendant, Ran, who is the mother to Keisuke and Yosuke, and also the real family head. The Goto family highly values bloodlines, and Keisuke's father couldn't become the family head since he married into the family. The fact that Keisuke is now the head suggests that his mother might have been deceased. The police reveal that Ran disappeared 18 years ago. Daigo recalls the hollow face, who mentioned being saved 18 years ago, thinking it's likely that Ran was the one who rescued the hollow face. The investigation unit is astonished at Daigo's findings. He mentions that he has an accomplice investigating the child's hiding place. He had summoned Utada to help, deliberately mentioning the traitor to distract Hitman, expecting him to search all risk-prone positions in the Goto household. Utada's mission is to tail Hitman and find the suspicious location. On the other hand, Yosuke couldn't bear the thought of the child being eaten and planned to let him escape. However, Hitman showed up and seized Yosuke, accusing him of being the traitor. Yosuke flatly denied this, saying while he saved the child, he had never been a traitor to the Goto family. Hitman then threw him into a cage, ordering that he not be released until things were clear, and left. Not too far from the underground prison, Utada had been watching everything through a telescope. He deduced that this secretive place must be where the child was hidden. Utada immediately sent the coordinates to Daigo. Daigo marked the coordinates on his map and was about to leave when the chief stopped him from acting alone. The chief came up with a plan. When the festival begins, all villagers would gather at the shrine, leaving the prison unguarded. The prison was a distance away from the shrine, providing enough time to escape if discovered. They would rescue the kidnapped children during this time, which meant the next morning. With each member of the Goto family wielding a hunting rifle, the few of them might not be enough. Someone suggested applying for support from the backups, but they had too little evidence at hand. The team head decided to try to persuade their superiors anyway, regretting for life if a child really was eaten. The team head assigned tasks and sent a female officer to bring Daigo's wife and daughter. Wobbling a bit, the female officer left, indicating that she was pregnant. As she stepped out, a cop stopped her. He was assigned by their superiors to accompany her. The team leader called their superior. The response was that they could deploy the special force, but only with direct evidence. Daigo, hearing this, realized the most direct evidence would be the hollow face. He called him, hoping he could show up and explain everything to the police, and asked if Ran was the one who saved him originally. The hollow face glanced behind him and confirmed that, saying he even recognized her as his mother now, and she was still alive. He promised that if his mother was willing to come forward, he would as well. But the festival was the next morning. If they didn't come today, the child could not be saved. The hollow face asked Ran to come forward and tell the truth. Ran, however, refused outright. Upon hearing that the hollow face had been in contact with the police, she scolded him. The hollow face knew that Ran was trying to protect her real sons, Keisuke and Yosuke. However, Ran corrected him, saying it's they who are protecting her. She then drifted into memories of the distant past. Suddenly one day, Granny Goto told Ran to avoid any further involvement with Keisuke and Yosuke. She even claimed that her two sons wanted the same. Ran was stunned, saying she wouldn't be able to survive if she couldn't see her children. But Granny Goto responded that she should choose to die. One day later, when Ran saw Keisuke, she gave a friendly greeting with a smile. In response, Keisuke made a sour face and said she was so pathetic. Hearing this, Ran was incensed. She grabbed her son and pinned him against a tree, nearly strangling him. Then the once-a-year festival arrived. The Goto family gathered around the altar. The white-eyed old man crawled over like a beast and began to bite the child on the altar, making his face hollow. At this moment, Ran came out, grabbed a torch, and set the old man's head on fire. As everyone was busy putting out the fire, she took the child and fled. However, she didn't get far before being surrounded by the Goto family. Facing her fate, Ran accepted her end. Granny Goto picked up her hunting rifle, ready to kill Ran. This was her own daughter she was about to kill, and the village head, Ran's husband, stood by with no expression on his face. At that moment, Keisuke fired a shot from behind, demanding his granny to let his mother and the child go. The granny was concerned that Ran would reveal the village's secrets. Keisuke promised that his mother would keep the village's secret. If not, he would kill himself. Granny Goto made Keisuke promise not to disobey her orders in the future. Keisuke agreed. In the end, the granny let Ran and the child go. This is what happened 18 years ago. As the story ended, the sky gradually darkened. The hollow face's phone rang again, but he had to hang up. The police were at a loss. Without a witness, they could not act tomorrow to save a child who would be eaten. Inside the village, the Goto family was having a party. Everyone was overjoyed except for Keisuke, who looked worried. The short man assured Keisuke not to worry about Daigo. The police didn't want to escalate the situation. Just like before, everyone would think Daigo was crazy. Keisuke grabbed him and shouted at him to get lost and went to drink alone. Suddenly, Hitman burst in, declaring there's a traitor among them and he thought it might be Yosuke, but it could also be Ran. Keisuke wasn't pleased and started a fight with Hitman. The fat henchman pulled them apart. Hitman began a mad investigation in the Goto house. Whenever he suspected someone, he would beat them up. If they had a bad attitude, he would bite off their ears and swallow them whole, including the earwax. At night, the shrine priest met up with Keisuke in the woods. As it turns out, the two of them grew up together and were close in their youth. The priest is now serving at the shrine, while Keisuke has become the head of the Goto family. Although their roles have changed drastically, they were still best friends since childhood, who now held significant power. This should make things easier. The priest proposed that if they cooperated, they could save the children. But Keisuke dismissed his words as nonsense and turned to leave. The priest pulled out a hidden gun from his side, threatening to kill him if he didn't agree. In response, Keisuke pushed him into the water. When the priest asked why he did this, Keisuke replied that everything he did was to protect the Goto family and his biological mother, Ran. Meanwhile, Daigo called his wife. Yuki and Mashiro were still under his former partner's protection. Yuki could tell that the investigation wasn't going smoothly. Daigo confessed that he felt an uncontrollable rage brewing within him, fearing that he might hurt others, just like in the past. Yuki comforted him, saying that he understands himself so well that he would surely be able to control it. If he couldn't control it, then not to. Most importantly, he must return safely to them. Daigo agreed and told them to wait for the police, who would take over their protection from his former partner. With the encouragement of his wife, Daigo planned to head to the coordinates sent by Utada to rescue the children overnight. The chief upstairs watched Daigo leave alone. He returned to the others and announced that Daigo had gone to the front lines. If he died, the police would have a reason to step in. It was actually quite a plan. Meanwhile, in the jail, Keisuke led a group of people inside and urgently moved Yosuke and all the children out. Elsewhere, Satake led the villagers to set up the straw man. The festival would begin early the next morning. Daigo arrived at the children's prison overnight. He easily cut the chain at the gate with pliers, but after looking around inside, he found only an empty jail. There was nobody. Now he had lost his evidence again. Daigo found a tuft of hair on the ground when the wide-eyed old man suddenly rushed out to flex his monstrous figure, craving human flesh and blood. On the other hand, the female officer and the cop finally arrived at Yuki's location. Daigo's former partner had already received the news and opened the door to let them in, ready to hand over the mother and daughter to them. However, the cop pulled out a gun and revealed his family name is also Goto. Meanwhile, Sumire hurriedly arrived at the village. She was certainly there to find Keisuke, especially since she was carrying the child of the Goto family. Back to Daigo, when he opened his eyes again, the festival had already begun. Keisuke appeared, his face covered in blood, and handed Daigo a bloody piece of meat, telling him to try it too and saying this is what Daigo had been wanting to investigate, and they were all cannibals. The story of the first season ends here. Unexpectedly, Daigo had planned to create a fake traitor to deceive the Goto family, but a real traitor emerged from the police department. There will certainly be a fierce battle for the second season. This is Daniel CC Movie Channel. Stay safe and enjoy your day.